Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Friday, and welcome to another fun and jam-packed, as it always is, episode of the Brew City Lounge. I am your host, Brandon. You can please go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Wisco_Brandon. Also, please don't forget to follow the show on Facebook and YouTube as well at Brew City Pod. Super excited for you guys to be tuning in today. If you are on the live stream, good afternoon to you. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. The weather is phenomenal in the Milwaukee area, so please get out there and enjoy it. If you are listening on your smart device, wherever you may be, I hope you are doing absolutely phenomenal, and thank you so much for giving my show a listen. It is an absolute honor and privilege to be here talking about our favorite teams. Of course, I am talking about those Milwaukee Bucks and Milwaukee Brewers. Lots to talk about, lots to break down. Last weekend was a phenomenal weekend for Milwaukee. We're going to touch base on that. The Bucks are getting ready to take on those annoying, stingy Brooklyn Nets. The Brewers win last night. They're 9-3 in their last 12 games. We're going to talk about, have they possibly turned the corner as the offense woken up a little bit? Yelich with a home run last night was great to see. And then NBA playoffs. Is it time now with LeBron James out of the NBA playoffs as they lose last night to the Phoenix Suns? Is it time for Giannis to take that NBA crown and take it away from LeBron James, who has held it for quite some time? So we're going to talk about all of that. Just a few quick announcements. Do not forget, if you guys are listening in on Facebook, on Twitter, the Brew City Lounge now has its official merchandise. Click on the link, shop for your favorite items, t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, cups, all that stuff. But I'm joined by special guests joining me now, brought to you by the good folks over at One Call Technology. Please give them a call at 888-585-8850 for all your business telecom needs. Mr. Kevin Holden from CBS 58 out of Milwaukee. He's also the Spanish play-by-play for the Brewers on the Wisconsin Telemundo. Please give him a follow on Twitter at 321QKevin. That's CUEKEVIN. Kevin, thank you so much for joining the show. It's an honor to have you on. I've watched and listened to you for quite some time, and I appreciate you jumping on. How you doing?
Brandon, thanks for having me. Glad to be here, and man, they're doing great. I mean, you summed it up well. You got good temps, you got good sports. Bucks doing things. The Brewers starting to finally turn it and make things happen. I mean, this is, as a sports fan and as a fan of good living, this is it, man. We're here.
It's especially after the year we had last year. Now, Milwaukee's COVID-19 restrictions have peeled back a little bit. Rules at American Family Field have changed. There's now 50%, and in a couple of weeks are going to obviously go to 100%. The tropical tailgate was last night into this morning. It's starting. I don't want to jinx it, but it sounds like things are a little bit normal now.
It's going that direction. I mean, so I was at the game last night, the Brewers game last night as a fan, and the thing that was interesting to me is certain sections of the ballpark were packed in pretty well. This was more a function of seats being available. It's a Thursday night game. They won't sell a game like that out, obviously, but the announced attendance was like 12,500. And I remember looking at that and thinking, there's a time in my life when 12,500 was like, man, what did they do wrong? And then there's a time in my life when 12,500 was like, you're putting those people in the same place at the same time. So isn't it nice to know that it's a normal Thursday night crowd, and that, like you said, in a couple of weeks, you could fill every seat in the stadium. And it is just a byproduct of a lot of hard work from a lot of people to get to this point of a vaccine, this point of, slowing the spread of the virus. I am not a virus expert, but I did everything I could to stay free of it, and thankfully did not get it during this time. And to all the other people that did it, thank you, because it's because of you that we can pack American Family Field in a few weeks.
And it's just, especially with, like, okay, everybody that lives in Wisconsin knows that, our winters are very long and they're very drawn out, and now the world is starting to normalize a little bit, and it's the best time to be living in Milwaukee. Festivals are starting back up. The lakes are open. Fishing's in full swing. The Bucks are in the playoffs. The downtown the Deer District was packed against the first round against the Miami Heat. I can only imagine what it's going to be in a couple of weeks or in a week or so whenever they do get back to Milwaukee. I don't know what the Bucks schedule is right now against the Nets. I know they start Saturday, but as far as the Deer District goes, it's just, I mean, to see that, turn into something after not having it last year and it be taken away from us, unfortunately, it's just amazing to have it back.
It's the truth. And here's the other thing too that I thought was interesting. What the Bucks just did to the Heat was, I think on the surface you look at it as a revenge series. The Heat knocked them out of last year's playoffs, and this is this nice little bounce back on the part of the Bucks. They beat the Heat. They make us all happy. We don't have to watch Tyler Hero dance all over everything. But the thing that I came out of it as, like, I came in thinking revenge series. The thing that I left that series with, the takeaway, was that I feel like the bubble was a bubble. You know what I mean? I feel like the bubble was a television show that was not connected to reality, because the two teams that were in the finals last year, the Heat won 0 games. And LeBron, I mean, I get it. It's a different world with the Lakers. He was not 100%. AD was clearly hurt, and the other parts are parts. But, like, that was the bubble last year. They were the class of the NBA last year, and they weren't anything this time around. Anyway, what I mean by that is, if Bucks fans are worried about last year, I think they proved, the Bucks did in this series win over the Heat, that last year was kind of a fluke. Like, I think this is a championship contending team.
And it's honestly funny that you brought that up, because I was actually in a very deep argument with some friends on a group chat, because I said, the Lakers obviously get bounced last night. LeBron and Anthony Davis are out of the playoffs in the first round, and so are the Miami Heat. And I called them bubble frauds. And everybody, that's a Lakers fan or a LeBron fan, they get so worked up, and they're like, well, everybody was on an even playing field last year. And I said, well, kind of, because going in, people forget. Kevin, as you're well aware of, most people that are not fans of Milwaukee forget that this team was, before COVID, they were historically great. I mean, they were on their way to 70 wins, obviously had the number 1 seed locked up in early March, just cruising along, playing the best basketball that I think they've ever played, in a regular season, in my lifetime at least. And then all of a sudden COVID hits and you stop until July. So then you tell these guys, hey, I know you just played, the past 6-7 months and we're the number 1 seed and you busted your behinds to get to that home court advantage, but we're going to put you in a bubble. There's not going to be any fans, so you won't have any advantage. The area, the arena, whatever you are that you're playing in is going to be, the lighting's going to be poor on it. So it's going to benefit the shooters. You're not going to play in front of your fans. You're taking everything away from what that Bucks team, played for in that regular season. And it just benefited teams like the Lakers, who had good shooters. You heard multiple players, Danny Green, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero. They said that shooting in the bubble was completely different than shooting in a regular NBA arena. The lights were different. Obviously, there's no fans. It was completely different. I don't want to take away the Lakers championship, because I think if the Bucks won a championship, we would celebrate it. But I still don't think it's a legitimate championship.
It's, at the very least, it's got to put like a little asterisk or something. Because I mean, the court, you're not lying. The court was like, how when you used to go to the roller skating rink and they'd throw the black light on? That's what it looked like to me.
Yeah, it did.
It was like they were playing on the moon, and it's weird for a couple of reasons. The court it's a legitimate point, obviously, and changes the dynamic of the game. It helps the shooters. I mean, you hit that on the head. The other thing it did was it not only took momentum away from the Bucks, but it helped other teams with injuries heal. Yep. And then the other part, if you want to throw another layer on top of it, is it wasn't a predetermined time away, because it was an unprecedented thing. None of us had experienced this in our lives. And all of a sudden, everybody go home, and you're going to sit until you don't sit anymore. Well, is that 2 weeks? Is that 6 months? Is it a year? You know what I mean? So there's anything that anybody was trying to do, and this is, not just an NBA team, but anybody. You come home and you have these goals in life, and all of a sudden you can't get anywhere. You're just here. So I think that's really difficult. And then trying to pick things back up was really difficult. I mean, we played we played softball as this group that I'm with played softball in a league that started in July. And I put on pounds between March and July because I didn't know if I was going to play in 2020. I was not in shape,
Yeah, it's, and the argument goes back and forth about, oh, well, everybody played, in the bubble. And that's fair. But my biggest thing was you just hit it on the head is guys, an NBA season is playing the regular season, obviously getting into the playoffs, and how you get into the playoffs is a huge determining factor. Now, obviously, the NBA regular season has a little bit of issues with load management and blah, blah, blah. But the Bucks, Giannis is not going to take games off. They worked for that number one seed. They earned that number one seed. And then for them to not have any benefits off of that number one seed, and I get it, and I give credit to the NBA for being able on such unprecedented times to be able to put on a quote unquote tournament, whatever you want to call it, whatever it was, in a bubble area, was phenomenal on their part. But I don't see how it's legitimate. But I do think that this championship, this whoever does win this year, it will be a legitimate championship, and it could be even more so than it was last year. I know LeBron likes to say that it was the hardest run he's ever had, any championship anybody's ever won. I don't buy that. But this year they stopped playing in October and obviously started back up in December. And now you're going from regular season right to the playoffs. So into that first round with the Miami Heat, the Bucks get the Heat. A lot of Bucks fans, Kevin, were a little bit hesitant about that matchup. They were worried about, last year's bubble. I had David Ramil on my podcast a couple weeks ago prior to that series. He's the host of the Locked On Heat podcast, and he also writes for The Athletic. So I was getting his opinion on the matchup, and he was strictly going off of last year's matchup. He said the Heat were going to win in 5 or 6 games. Obviously, we know how that turned out. What were some of your takeaways from that first round matchup, that first round sweep of the Miami Heat?
It wasn't just sweet in the sense that it was 4 straight wins over the team that beat them last year. It was sweet in the sense that you could argue that maybe the biggest criticism of the Bucks, especially in the second half of the year, they answered it directly, and it was defensive effort. What they did in games 3 and 4 in Miami. I mean, look, you got. I mean, I'm smiling, right? Like my job and our job to cover, to like look at this as a professional, right? So you put on a different set of eyes, but I was smiling like, okay, we're going to hold you like completely down. Like Giannis is going to have more rebounds than Jimmy Butler has points.
Yep.
Then, we're looking pretty good here in that sense, the Bucks are. So to me, that was the most satisfying thing. And the thing that will help them the most going forward, not just in this one series, but if they get past the Nets onto the Eastern Conference Finals and on from there, is if they can maintain the defensive intensity, the defensive effort that they put in Miami. That was how many times in the regular season were we saying, yelling, to defend the three? I mean, they're giving up just slews of 3-pointers in these different games, and it went away. So is it lightning in a bottle? Who knows? But if they can at least take the momentum from that, the defensive effort, and put that into Brooklyn, as tough as that's going to be, that's a huge win for them.
So obviously Kevin Durant going to Brooklyn, coming into the Eastern Conference, was an eye opener for not only for the league, but the Milwaukee Bucks. They knew what they were going to go up against eventually in the playoffs. Now, I don't know that I'm not a conspiracy guy that's going to go out there and think that, there's other things going on. But Kevin Durant in July was on a podcast, and he was quoted as saying the 2 best defensive players that he goes up against were Drew Holiday and PJ Tucker.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that there's a coincidence that those 2 players are currently on this Milwaukee roster. Obviously, a credit to John Horst, credit to Lazary's, the ownership group. I think they knew what they were doing. Now, a lot of people at that time of getting Drew Holiday complained about too many first-round draft picks. Who cares? If you're drafting in the late 20s in the NBA, it's not like the NFL. Who cares? Getting a guy like Drew Holiday, and I just started this podcast like 2 months ago. My very first show, I spent about 30 minutes telling the world or whoever listens how much I love Drew Holiday, because I as an avid basketball fan, as a diehard Milwaukee Bucks fan, did not realize how good he truly was. And PJ Tucker was actually just quoted as kind of saying the same thing. He goes, I knew he was good, but I didn't think he was like this good. He's always in control. He's never worried. He's never, overstressed. He's always in control. And that interview with Kevin Durant, and then seeing that the Bucks go out and get both of those players, obviously PJ Tucker came in the middle of the year via trade. What are your thoughts on Drew Holiday? Now, PJ Tucker is obviously he's a dog, is what he likes to say. He's going to go out and play defense and scrap for the ball. But I love Drew Holiday. I love what he does. Number one, on the court, I don't think he gets enough credit for the things he does off the court with him and his wife. But he is turning into one of my favorite players.
Yeah, he should. I mean, he gives you so much, and that's the thing is when that first happened, when the Bucks get Drew Holiday, you look at the stat sheet, right? You see the points and rebounds and assists. That's the first three things you look at, and they don't tell the story of Drew Holiday. Not completely. It's not a true accurate picture of Drew Holiday. What he does for his teammates, what he does to make his teammates better, the interviews that he gives between games, the answers that he gives. Like, this is a guy that if you never saw the Bucks play a game and you saw a Drew Holiday interview, that's a key guy in the room. That's a guy that's going to help them go, right? You don't have to see him on the court to know what his value is to the team, but then you do see him on the court, and it's like, Eric Bledsoe, who?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
man, there's the thing, right? Is 2 years ago or 3 years ago, these last couple of runs that the Bucks had outside the bubble, where it was like, okay, when Bledsoe had a good game, hey, this guy's a really key player. And then when Bledsoe had one of those stinkers, it's like, like just killing a playoff run. Drew Holiday doesn't have that. Drew Holiday is this consistent guy who is successful and helps his teammates be successful. I think, you obviously it's a Giannis and Middleton kind of thing, but beyond those two, I think that's the guy that makes this thing go.
And I think it also opens the door. Now, a lot of people have been calling for Mike Budenholzer. I believe Shams Charania of the Athletic said that if they don't have a deep run, that his job might be in jeopardy. But I think now seeing Drew Holiday play, and not offensively, I mean, what you're going to get out of him. He's averaging, 15 to 20 points a game. The flexibility that he provides on defense for Mike Budenholzer. Now, we saw the rotations change a little bit in that first round against Miami. There was not many times. I can only think of one time that there was not one member of the big three, Giannis, Chris Middleton, or Drew Holiday, on the court at the same time. I mean, you saw Drew Holiday guarding everybody in that Miami Heat lineup, 1 through 5. I mean, he was guarding Bam, obviously was on Goran Dragic, who was the leading scorer for Miami Heat. He only averaged 16 points a game. Bryn Forbes outscored Jimmy Butler. That's just a little fun tidbit for the Heat fans out there. But seeing a guy like Drew Holiday being able to guard anybody on the opposing team, and you're going to see him on Kevin Durant in the second round. You're going to see him on James Harden and obviously Kyrie Irving. I think his defensive part, I've called him the best two-way guard in the NBA. People will say probably Chris Paul, Mike Conley's pretty good, but Drew Holiday is so undervalued throughout the NBA. Watching him play defense night in and night out, averaging almost 3 steals a game, phenomenal guy. And I think it's opened up the defense. You're seeing, yes, the playoff defense is better. You're getting, you have the defensive player of the year, reigning defensive player of the year in Giannis. Brook Lopez is no slouch. Chris Middleton's really good. Then you add in Drew Holiday. I mean, 1 through 5 defensively, this is the best Bucks team from a defensive standpoint that we've probably seen in quite some time.
That's why I'm the most excited about what they can do, even against this super Nets team. And, I don't know how much you watch our channel, but Bill Walsh is a guy that's been an anchor with us for years. Walsh's a huge basketball fan, and it's not uncommon during the day if the two of us are working. We work in these like rows of cubicles, but we sit opposite each other. He's facing this way, I'm facing this way, and I'll hear this voice over my shoulder. And this past weekend, the voice said, "How do you set it up? You guard. You take 2 of the big 3 out. Which 2 do you take out?" And I kind of look around, and it's Walsh, and he said, "You got to make Irving beat you, don't you?" And I said, You do.
Yeah.
Like and look, it's still not a great option. Kyrie Irving's a terrific basketball player, but I think you begin defensively with the philosophy of Harden and Durant are the two that you pay the most attention to, and you do your best then past that with Irving or with whoever else. But I think Drew, like you said, Drew is going to end up on whoever these guys, and that allows Mike Budenholzer to match the rest of the defensive alignments. In the best way possible for the guys that he's got, right? And I'm excited to see Giannis and Harden just because Giannis has the kindest heart in the world.
Yep.
Except when it comes to James Harden, and kind of makes me smile.
I saw it on Twitter, and I don't know who had it, but there was like a 2 or 3 minute montage put together of all the things. And this, I didn't know this, but this actually goes back to Giannis's rookie year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did not know that. Something happened. They got into each other's faces. Giannis was, he looked like, not what he looks like now. Skinny, 180-pound kid, basically. Yeah, he got in. Him and James Harden were at each other's faces, and I don't know the backstory on it, but it goes back some time now. There's definitely some bad blood between the two. I'm also curious to see how PJ Tucker takes to James Harden. Now, it's not going to catch the storylines. You're not going to hear. I don't know if they have any, off the court beef or on the court beef. There's something obviously happened in Houston. I don't know. You haven't heard James Harden, or excuse me, PJ Tucker talk about him a ton. So I'm just a little curious if we're going to see maybe a hard foul here and there for what James Harden, how he exited the Houston Rockets and obviously was perceived as just kind of quitting on the team. So kind of interested to see how that plays out. But I do want to touch base about Giannis and against this team. Now, if I told you that Giannis was the X factor against Brooklyn, you would obviously, that's an obvious answer. His number line against Brooklyn, Kevin, is he's averaging 40 points per game against the Brooklyn Nets in 3 games. I mean, again, people are like, oh, the big three didn't play together. Well, that's okay. Kyrie Irving's not guarding Giannis, and neither is James Harden. So he's averaging it's 39.7, but we'll round up to 40. 11 rebounds and 5 assists against this Brooklyn team. Now, every series, Giannis is going to be the X factor. He's the best player in the NBA. He's the 2-time MVP. He's going to be the best player. But when you're averaging 40 points a game, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists against one single team, that says a lot. I mean, there's nobody, in my opinion, on that Brooklyn Nets team that can stop and guard Giannis night in and night out, especially over the course of 7 games.
Yeah, and you put up stat lines like that on a consistent basis in the series. Like if you can stay close to that stat line through each game of the series, they got a shot to steal one. Then that to me is the biggest thing, and it's the biggest thing in any major NBA playoff series. It's about stealing one in the other guy's house, and that's what the Bucks could do to really set this series off is to take one of the first 2. I don't know if it's going to happen,
right?
All right, game 1, there's all the intensity and everything that comes with that opening game, the extra nerves and whatever, and Brooklyn takes it. But if the Bucks take game 2 and they come back and it's 3 and 4 here with it tied 1-1, and you've got Giannis being Giannis, and you've got Drew Holiday playing defense on everything that's moving, that to me is where it is. Like, it's a weird thing to look at a series that hasn't started yet and try to pinpoint a single game. But game 2 is that game for me. Game 2 is where the Bucks could reach in, steal one, and pull the momentum of the series.
And I think too, and I agree with you. I think I personally said I'm a homer, whatever. I think the Bucks win game 1. I think they kind of come out and they surprise. First off, Brooklyn did not see defense in round 1 the way that the Bucks are going to bring defense in round 2. Jaylen Brown was out of that series. Kemba Walker was out. If Jason Tatum wasn't dropping 50, the game wasn't even close. So the intensity and toughness that the Milwaukee Bucks are going to bring in game 1 I think is going to be a little bit of a shock to Brooklyn. Now, obviously they can talk about it that they're expecting it, but it's different, when you're expecting it versus actually seeing it in face. So I think I think they are going to win. I do have the Bucks winning game one. Now, I agree with you. A series, the old saying goes, a series doesn't start until the road team wins. I do think that it's pivotal that whether it's game one, which I think they'll win, or game two that the Bucks do win. I think that takes all the pressure, if there is any, because you could sit out there and be like, everybody expects Brooklyn to get to the finals. Nobody expects Milwaukee to beat the Brooklyn Nets outside of maybe a couple people and the whole city of Milwaukee or Bucks fans in general. All the pressure's on Brooklyn. If you grab one game, one of those first two games, all that pressure just mounts a little bit more, and you'll start to see it may be a little bit of friction in between that locker room. Guys, we know how Kevin Durant is. Kyrie Irving's a character of his own. So maybe you'll start to disrupt a little bit of the chemistry. Now, look, these guys have only played 13 games together. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden. They haven't played together a whole lot. So the continuity, the cohesiveness may not be there if they get disrupted in those first one or two games in Brooklyn. All the pressure, in my opinion, is on Brooklyn.
Yeah, you've got a good point that when you see a roster with that many stars on it, yeah, they've got star power, but they've got stars, and that's a different animal. You've got egos, right? I mean, that's where you see teams that on paper look like they would be the best in the league, and a lot of times they don't win a title, and a lot of it has to do with the distribution of egos. And that goes back to your point about Harden, because when Harden was done in Houston was done. Like, man, like, I mean, you see it sometimes where like a star player is headed for a divorce with a team or whatever. Wow, did I just drop a little Packers hint there? You know what I mean, though? When that happens, the dynamic changes, right? Yeah. Some cases, like the one in Green Bay, everybody seems to, be okay rallying around what happens after. But in Harden's case, man, like he blew it up. Like when Harden was done, that franchise was like ready to relocate to Seattle, man. That was terrible. And that makes you wonder if, like you say, if a couple things go wrong, if those egos start to clash. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and I think it's just very important that you get one of those first two games. Obviously, if you don't, it's not the end of the series, but you're kind of playing into what Brooklyn wants to do. They're going to be okay with dropping a few in Milwaukee as long as they get to go back home. I don't know a whole lot about the Brooklyn fan base. I don't know a whole lot of the arena. I don't like how it looks. I don't know if they have fans. I know they have some fans in the stands. I don't know how many, if the percentages, but I could tell you one thing. Game 3, the Fiserv is going to be rocking. They're going to be back to 100% for the Bucks from here on out in the playoffs, should they advance any farther. I do want to ask you real quick, if you could, or if you have them, 3 important things, X factors, keys, whatever you want to, adjective you want to describe. What are your 3 that absolutely, in your opinion, need to happen to see this Milwaukee Bucks team beat the Brooklyn Nets?
Number 1 is defensive patience. I think we've gone over defense and how much it's meant to the Bucks. There's going to be a difference in this series when you're guarding all of that scoring talent on the court, and it can be easy when you're doing that for 48 minutes a night over the course of a series. It can be easy to get frustrated because someone's dropping 40, and it might be a couple of people dropping 40 some of these nights. So it's not just defense; it's defensive patience. That don't get frustrated by it. Just keep, be a dog, keep going out and scrapping and fighting. And that's, to me is number 1, defensive patience. 2, this Bucks team hit a different level against the Heat for 2 reasons, and defense was 1, and Bryn Forbes was the other. Like, okay,
fireman,
right? Where did that come from? I mean, obviously, we've seen him do this some in the regular season, but to do it in those games, in the games of that kind of importance, is huge. I think you don't need 7 games of it from Bryn Forbes, but if you get 2 or 3 where he can be a difference maker, where he can pour in points, because you will have to kind of run from a point standpoint. There are going to be some nights in this series you need 135, right? Because you're going to give up 133. So this is one of those things that they'll need to happen. They'll need to pour in some points from Bryn Forbes. So that's 2. Those are like my two big ones. And I would say the third one is, we talk about all of the big names, right? You and I have mentioned here, Brandon, we've talked about the Durants and the Hardens and the Kyrie Irvings and the Giannis's, but we don't want to talk about Chris Middleton. And where this Bucks team went from a pretty good collection of parts to a team that could win a title was a guy behind Giannis who could do the things that Chris Middleton could do. And I think maybe he's the one that sneaks past some people when you talk about the important guys of the series. So there it is, defensive patience. Give me some Bryn Forbes threes and Chris Middleton doing Chris Middleton things, and they can win it.
We're pretty matched up, and I agree. Really, all three. I mean, you can't go wrong, really, with any of those. My two of my first three are kind of matched up with yours. Now, going into the Miami Heat series, the Bucks through the regular season, they weren't always the best. They had the ninth rated defense efficiency, but they gave up a lot of corner threes. They gave up a lot of open shots. They're switching a ton more on defense prior to this season. So last year, they switched on-ball screens at a 4.2 rate per game. I mean, meaning 4 switches per game. So far in the playoffs, up to this year, they're at almost 19. So that tells me that obviously the team, philosophy on defense has obviously changed. They're switching, and that I think is attributes to Drew Holiday being able to guard anybody pretty much on the court. So with all that mumbo jumbo thrown at you, I think the number one key for this series is tough defense. Now it's easy. That's everybody can say, well, obviously they only allowed the Miami Heat to score 98 points per game. Okay. That was 12 points below their season average. Now, 2 of those games were in Miami, where you would imagine coming out down 0-2 in a series, game 3, they would have came out firing on all cylinders. It was your home court. That's because the defense in Milwaukee has changed. We have seen it over the regular season where people were, stressing out about, the Mike Budenholzer allowing corner threes. There wasn't many open shots. Now, it's the NBA. Guys are going to get open shots. They're going to scheme. Good coaches and good coordinators, whatever you want, assistant coaches, they're going to scheme to get some guys open. You're going to, obviously, James Harden's going to find shots. He's going to be able to create. So is Kyrie Irving. But to play, like you said, it kind of ties into patience, consistently playing tough defense. Let them know that you're here. Let them know they're not going to walk in the paint like they did in Boston. And Kevin Durant is going to always get his. But I'm going to tell you right now, what a lot of people fail to forget, his numbers, when Giannis is guarding him, he is shooting under 30%. Just a little food for thought. Obviously, Giannis makes him uncomfortable. He's a little bit taller than Kevin Durant. Obviously, his girth is absolutely there. So that's my number one. Play good, tough defense. Let them know you're there. Quote, unquote, beat them up if you have to. Number 2 kind of ties into what you said, Bryn Forbes. Now, I got into a little bit of an argument on the dark web. I call Twitter and Facebook the dark web because that's kind of what it is, Kevin, as you probably already know. But they said it was Miami Heat Twitter, and they were like, "Well, we didn't expect Bryn Forbes to have the series of his life." So I said, "Okay, let me do a little bit of research here because I want to know what Bryn Forbes did in this series versus maybe what he did prior." In that series, Bryn Forbes shot 48.5% from the 3-point range. He was 16 from 33. Phenomenal. Absolutely. Was it that much better than the regular season? So I looked at that. In the regular season, he shot 45.2%, which is equivalent to 1 extra made basket. So really, this is what you've been getting out of Bryn Forbes all year. We just haven't seen it necessarily on a big stage. So my number 2 point kind of ties into yours, ties into Bryn Forbes, is clutch, timely shots. When you need a big basket, who are you going to look for? Is it going to be Chris Middleton? As you said it, I agree with. Is it going to be Bryn Forbes? You're going to have to pick up the slack from Dante DiVincenzo. Now, I know he didn't average 20 points a game, but he hit a few shots here and there. He was able to drive to the hole. Getting those timely shots when the Nets are on a little bit of a run, can you shut it down with a Chris Middleton 17-footer? Is Bryn Forbes going to come off the bench and score 10, 15, 20 points, whatever it is? Something to take a little bit of the pressure off the big 3. Clutch, timely shots. And my last point is rebounding. Now, it's simple. Again, just like the first one, everybody says, well, of course you need to rebound. The Bucks do not blow out the Miami Heat if they don't out-rebound them 59-42 on average throughout that series. I mean, that's a difference of 17 rebounds in a game where you had, Bam Adebayo, who's one of the best NBA offensive and defensive rebounders there is. The Nets in the first round have been the worst defensive rebounding team in the playoffs. The Bucks, the second best. That's my difference, I think, with those guys. Do not let them get second, third chance opportunities. I think if you shut them down when it comes to rebounding the basketball, playing good defense, tough defense, they're gonna score. Like, we're not idiots. Kevin Durant's 7 feet tall and dribbles the ball like Steph Curry. He's gonna get his points. But if you do the little things like both of us mentioned, playing that tough defense, being patient, Chris Middleton hitting key shots, Bryn Forbes coming off the bench and continuing to do what he did in the first round, and obviously rebounding the ball, which I do not think they'll have a problem doing. I give this team a realistic chance to beat this team.
It would be fun. And honestly, what it will be, I think, is one of these, fights for the ages. And going back to the point of this rumor that's floated around about Budenholzer, if they go 7 and it's just like 7 grueling games, like 7 games you'll talk about, in a generation from now, and they lose the series, I would have a hard time getting rid of Mike Budenholzer. If they took the Nets to 7 and fought him to the last second, I don't think I can get rid of him.
No, and I was actually on my show. So I also do a Bucks post-game show. So I'm totally putting you on the spot here, Kevin. But if you ever want to jump on a post-game show, you know where to find me. I'll get you on. I go live after each game to kind of just talk about, I told my girlfriend, I said, it's only going to be 30 minutes. And 58 minutes later, and I'm still rambling on about something. So
that's what we do.
So I got the Bucks. I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here. I got the Bucks winning in 6. I think they take game 1. I think they drop game 2, and then somewhere down the line, they figure out how to win 4. I got the Milwaukee Bucks in 6 on the way. Let me throw this out there too. Before Joel Embiid's injury, I think this was the Eastern Conference Finals, in my opinion. I think whoever wins this game or this series, is probably going to go into Philly or Atlanta, whoever it may be, and win and beat those. But I do got the Bucks in 6. I do ask kindly for your prediction. I may have put you on the spot here, but
no, it's all good. No, I'm gonna go with you on the Bucks. I think it goes 7, and I think it is something out of a Rocky movie, man. I think it's like these guys landed punches to the last bell of the last round. To me, I don't know if there is going to be a series anywhere along the line in these playoffs that has me as excited as this one. Obviously, the finals are the finals because there's something different at stake. That's different. But in terms of team versus team, matchup versus matchup, this is it. This is the cream of the crop in the playoffs, and I think the teams understand it too, right? I mean, they understand what's at stake for the franchises, not just in these playoffs, but down the road. It's 7, it's Bucks in 7, but at the end of it, everybody's going to need like 3 weeks to recover, I think.
Oh, it's going to be interesting, and I hope either one of us are right. I'll take any Bucks in whatever, as long as we are on the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. Transitioning to our other team just down the street. I do want to talk to you for just a little bit longer if you got a little bit of more time regarding the Milwaukee Brewers. Now, kind of an up and down season. Started out really good. Everybody, it seems to be spending a little bit of time on the IL. Colton Wong went out of the game last night after striking out. Lorenzo Cain is back on the IL. And I'm going to start off with a negative question, and a question I hope I'm wrong at. But Kevin, are we starting to see the beginning of the end for the great Lorenzo Cain?
I worry a little bit about his durability at this point. And there's the one thing you could say on the opposite side for Cain, the one point you could make in his favor is because he opted out of 2020, he didn't, that was like, it's a year off. Now, it wasn't a year off because of injury, but it was a year off. The body changes, and you're not going through the same workouts. I'm sure he did what he could to stay fresh, but maybe this is an effect of having 2020 essentially as an off year. The pandemic has had some weird effects on different teams and different athletes. So maybe that's the case. I'm a little concerned that's not the case. I'm a little concerned that this is the beginning of more of a trend. And it's unfortunate because that's a guy that's a centerpiece, a really good player for a team that wants to make a deep playoff run. Fortunately, David Stearns has a setup with talented outfielders at all three positions, even if Kane doesn't play. That's the one thing they've got in his favor.
Yeah, and I hate, I said it when it happened. I put a tweet out. I'm hope I'm wrong because I love Lorenzo Cain. I think anybody that's a Milwaukee Brewers fan, really even a fan of baseball, the guy's, first off, he's a phenomenal player. Number two, he's a phenomenal person. So you hate to see that catch up, father time catch up with a guy, like Lorenzo Cain. Now I said it when the Brewers announced the Jackie Bradley 2 years, $24 million deal. The first thought that came to my mind was, that's for Lorenzo Cain, because I don't think even in spring training, he was out with his quad injury. I think, again, no discredit to him or to bash him. He took a year off because, listen, it was everybody's first time in a pandemic, so nobody really knew what was going on. But I think that Jackie Bradley Jr. signing was indicative on where Lorenzo Cain is currently. This is his third stint on the injured list. And unfortunately, with soft tissue injuries, as you guys know, it's not something that's just going to go away.
Oh, I know. But from not a watching athlete standpoint, Father Time is hitting me, man. I have both Achilles severed. One was my own doing in a softball game, and the other one I had a heel problem. The doctor had to go in and sever the Achilles. Anyway, you don't care about my injury history, but the point is, yes, it's exactly. It's difficult to see it for a guy like that because they could use it. But having Jackie Bradley Jr., and I know he hasn't hit the way people had hoped this year, but having Jackie Bradley Jr. as that guy, having Avisail Garcia as that guy, it's a different animal. And it means that outfield is not a huge position of worry for this team, and that's a good thing. Anything you can shore up, any position group that you can shore up makes me feel good.
Now, I said it on the intro to the show, and for those of you that are listening, I appreciate you on the YouTube or the Facebook or Twitter. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I did mention on the intro that the Brewers are 9-3 in their last 12 games. Now, 12 games ago, they made a trade at like 4:00 in the afternoon, right before a game, for shortstop Willy Adames out of Tampa Bay. Now, I'll be honest with you, Kevin, when it first was announced, I was mad because, not mad, but like a little upset because you just traded away Orlando Arcia, who was a clubhouse guy, who was a clutch hitter in the postseason. Defensively, he was phenomenal. And you traded him away for a couple arms out of the bullpen who we have yet to see, Sabaka and Patrick Weigel down in AAA. And then it was also sending out like a little bit of a mixed signal, like you just given up on Luis Urias, who I love, by the way. He's only 23 years old, but it was kind of a trade where I was like, okay, you gave away up a fan favorite, a good player, a good guy. You gave up on the guy that you gave up that player for in Luis Urias, and now you're on your third shortstop in the 2021 Major League Baseball season, and in doing so, you gutted key pieces to a bullpen which is probably your, outside of your offense, your weakest link right now. What were your thoughts, number one, on the trade in general? Number two, is there any reason that this Brewers team is 9-3 since grabbing and acquiring Willy Adames?
Well, going back to the bullpen point, you gave up two arms there that played some key roles. Feyereisen was good, a good pitcher, and Counsell was not hesitant to use him he's not Devin Williams or Josh Hader, but right. He was going to be used in some leverage type situations, and he's been really good in Tampa Bay. That should tell you a lot about that pitcher's talent. Yep. That was the one that made me the most concerned. The acquisition of Adames was, I thought it was essential, and it was sad because the few games before the trade, Luis Urias was starting to get the yips. He was starting to get, as far as shortstops go, but there's he was having trouble on these little throws to second base. And it's like, oh man, like you can't, that your shortstop cannot have the yips. Okay. It just can't happen. And Adames has come in and brought this energy. He's a spark plug for this team. He's fired up. It's funny that he wears 27 because I see a lot of Carlos Gomez in his style and his approach, and they're friends. Those two are friends.
Yep.
But I'll say over time, I think Brewers fans are going to be generally pretty happy with Adames. That strikeout rate is very high, and I do worry that there'll be points this year where there'll be a little bit of headache about striking out too much in big situations. But it's Major League Baseball in 2021. Everybody strikes out all the time in big situations, right? The Trevor Richards acquisition was good. He's a guy with some years of experience. Who was a starter pretty recently, who throws a good changeup. Trevor is just full disclosure. Trevor's a friend of the family. He worked for my wife when he was here in the off season a few years ago. So it's exciting to have him home. But as a bullpen piece, he's a good piece. He won't throw the eighth or ninth, but he's going to help. That trade was. I don't know if that trade is the reason for the turnaround. If that's what we're saying, I think it was essential to go get a shortstop. But Urias is still hitting in this utility role. So that part worked out great.
And I kind of want to touch on Urias. I love the guy. I thought when they made the trade in, 2019, at the end of 2019 where they gave up Zach Davies, I was on board with the Luis Urias trade. I think that as a guy, he's a kid. He's 23 years old. He's got a lot of talent. Obviously, you saw him with a little bit of pop last night. Everybody that had Bally Sports TV did see Kevin Holden and his lovely wife on TV after I believe it was the Avisail Garcia home run. I loved Luis Urias. I'm going to ask you a question. Again, might be putting you a little bit on the spot. Do you potentially see Luis Urias taking over for Travis Shaw, maybe at third base? Now, Travis Shaw, he's got 26 runs batted in. He's had some key clutch moments, but he's just not panning out. And it kind of reminds us of the 2018 Travis Shaw, where he kind of just tailed off from a production standpoint. Do you think that there's a possibility that maybe, Travis Shaw's gone, maybe they slide Luis Urias in that full-time row? Do they call up Zach Green, who's absolutely tearing the cover off the ball down in AAA Nashville? I mean, what do you think going forward is the answer here with Travis Shaw?
Yeah, it's been a little bit unfortunate. You see, the batting average, the things that he's done this year. You saw a couple of the at-bats last night. His first at-bat was a 2-0 count, and it's a pop-up to second. It's just there's a difference between the Shaw that was hitting all those homers a few years back and what he could do when he was ahead in the count and what he's able to do now. It's been a little bit – that level is down a little bit. And I do think there's going to – at some point there probably will be a change there. I think the Brewers might have to call up Zach Green because he has been good, and the Nashville Sounds have won 15 games in a row, and somebody on that team needs to be up. That's a reward for winning 15 in a row.
It's phenomenal what they're doing down there. I love the city of Nashville. I've been there one time. But I want to go back down there because when I was there, it was in the winter. There was no baseball season. But Nashville's such a fun city and such a fun, especially this time of year now that COVID's all gone. But speaking of the Nashville Sounds, who have won 15 in a row, what are your thoughts on Keston Hiura? Is he going back down to Nashville? When he was down there, he was batting .457. The guy was, he had he was 4 of 8 at one stretch with 4 doubles. That's the Keston Hiura. Of course, I'm speaking of his production down in Nashville. That's the Keston Hiura that is, was winning batting titles in the minor leagues prior to being called up by the Brewers a couple years ago. It just seems like something is off with him. Now, I know he's dealing with some personal issues off the field with his mother, and my thoughts and prayers are with their family. But what do you do? I feel like Craig Counsell and David Stearns are just caught between a rock and a hard place with this guy, because when they send him down, he's hitting the cover off the ball, and then you bring him up here and he's swinging through 90-mile-an-hour fastballs that, usually, ended up in the left field bleachers.
Or there was an at-bat in the game last night where he sees a pitch on the outer half of the plate and it's an RBI double to right center every time. And this time instead it was just a little tailor to right for an out. And there's the difference, right? It's funny that we can talk about these deep-rooted issues, for a Major League Baseball player when the difference is a couple of inches on the bat, just a just a little reaction time, a tenth of a second or 0.2 of a second of reaction time, which is my way of saying that I think Keston Hiura is still the professional hitter that we saw. And it just, for whatever reason, isn't working out for him right now. You know, if it's an off the field thing or if it's just, you know, he had to learn a new position. And look, first base, you know, comparatively is not that difficult, but it's a new position. And if you, especially if you haven't played it, you know, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of footwork. There's a lot of thinking out there. And as a hitter, if a percentage of your mindset is taken up trying to learn this new position on the fly, that can affect the other parts of your game. And I still think that that's kind of where this train got a little bit off the tracks with Hiura was, you know, picking up the new position. He's, you know, he's young and agile. He can do it. It's just the mental part, learning it. And so I think that we'll see Keston Hiura become Keston Hiura again, but it may not be in 2021. This may be an up and down year for him. I also think whatever happened to Colton Wong last night might have saved his major league job for a while.
Yeah, and I don't know. I haven't seen any news out of Colton Wong. I think they were I think the correct counsel was quoted after the game as saying they'll see how he feels pregame today. So we could see maybe some movement with the Brewers with a corresponding move if Colton Wong does find the IL, and he's been such a huge piece. Not only, obviously, you know what you bring defensively, but I mean, he's batting 282 right now, and consistently probably the outside of Omar Narvaez, maybe Avisail Garcia, probably the best hitter on this Brewers team. Now, just a few more questions before we do wrap up this show. Brewers are sitting at 30-26, and if you're looking at the schedule and you peek up in the division, the Cubs are at the top. Brewers 2 games behind the Cubs. Obviously, they've beat them 6 out of 9 times so far. They'll see them later in June, and the Cardinals are right there as well. Obviously, it's shaping up as most of us predicted to be a 3-team race in the National League Central. Looking at the schedule in June, it's very, 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 very weak. Is this? I've said this. I believe it was on my last show Tuesday. I had Chuck Freeman on. You know Chuck very well. And I said that this was going to be, if the Brewers were going to make the playoffs and eventually make a little bit of a run, we are going to look at June as being the reason why they are in the position. Now you play, I don't know if I think the only team they play with a winning record is the Chicago Cubs. I could be wrong. But it's a very weak schedule for the month of June. Is this a month, in your opinion, where you need to grab, 15, 20, wins and kind of set yourself a little bit, away from Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, maybe other teams in the National League?
June's a crucial month for the Brewers for a couple of reasons. One is the way the schedule stacks and the fact that, in theory, you should be able to do well against the Rockies and the Reds, who they play a ton here in this month of June. Baseball's a weird game. Doesn't mean that it's automatic. But the other reason why June is big is this is when I think you get 2 months into the season, and those first 2 months are about sort of feeling out what's new on the roster, what's different on the roster, what are the tendencies that are different for this team. And the Brewers have one tendency in 2021 that they have not had in the duration of my time in Milwaukee, and probably the duration of anybody else's time in Milwaukee, and that is elite starting pitching. Mm-hmm. It's incredible to watch Woodruff, to watch Burns, to watch when Peralta is at that level. Those three are there. How many teams in the last 10 or 12 years have been good enough, if they would have had one more elite starting pitcher, they could have, there's another round of the playoffs for them where they make the playoffs where they wouldn't have normally. So anyway, June is important because all of that has to come together. Your elite starting pitching can't sit out there on its own. You've got to be able to score enough to get them run support and win some games. And there's a luck component to it. The Brewers went through an incredibly difficult stretch with guys on the injured list with bad luck. That's starting to flip around. But what Christian Yelich did, this is what I want to get to. What Christian Yelich did last night was extremely encouraging to me. First at bat, he's facing Duplantier, and everything there is outside. They're working him outside. And the first pitch, Yelich gets a piece of and fouls it sort of back, kind of behind the on-deck circle, but back. Then the second one, he's around a little bit more, and it's down the left field line. Then the third one, he's around a little bit more, and it's a line shot to left. And you could see, and he was talking about it last night, Yelich was, how his timing has been, and we'll make this podcast friendly, not optimal lately. His timing has been not optimal. Those were not his words, but So anyway, he's on that liner to left, and they're working him outside, and you could right then you could see it. It was like this next at bat, they're going to work him inside, and this is his chance finally to get his timing. And they threw him a changeup in, and man, he sat on that. And the right field fans are going to need to start wearing armor if he hits them like that for the rest of the year, because that was a crushed ball.
Yeah.
It's one at bat. It's one sequence, I guess, two at bats, but that's where you find Yelich. That's where the Yelich begins again, and hopefully that turns into a whole bunch of at-bats like that, because that was the most encouraging thing I've seen from him in a long time.
Yeah, and Todd Rosiak also pointed out last night, I don't know if you caught it in person, he switched bats. He's not using his Louisville, the black trademark bat that he has. He did switch to a different bat. I don't know if that, plays into it, but I agree with you. And it's funny you bring that up, because Bill Schroeder on the telecast said the same thing. He goes, when you start seeing Yelich hitting for power opposite way. Now that home run or that flyout was almost, it was a few feet away from finding the fans in the stands. When you start seeing the ball come off the bat with Christian Yelich going to the opposite field, going to center or left field, and then obviously he smoked it to right field the next at bat. That's when you know the timing. That's when you know he's starting to get locked in. Now, we have to also give him a little bit of credit. Everybody loves to jump on Christian Yelich because he signed a big deal and he's not producing MVP numbers right now. The guy's coming off the IL with back injuries, been on the IL. He played it just in a few games since April. So I think once he gets going, here's my theory. Once Yelich gets going, I think Keston Hiura gets going. Because right now, and no offense to anybody in the lineup, Avisail Garcia, 11 home runs this year, batting almost 250. He's had a phenomenal year. I don't think opposing pitchers go into that lineup and are fearful of Avi Garcia or Omar Narvaez or maybe Colton Juan. When you get Yelich up there and his on base percentage is up over 700 and his slugging percentage and OPS starts creeping up a little bit, then you're going to see a little bit more of those pitchers be fearful of where Christian Yelich is, and you're going to start seeing Keston Hiura, that is going to start seeing some pitches that he can knock around. And then once he gets going, I think this team takes off with the division. I think that like you said, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, in my lifetime, Kevin, this is the best Brewer starting rotation that I've ever been a part of. I've been lucky to see a few games in person this year. I did get to see Corbin Burns pitch twice already, and what you see on TV doesn't do it justice of what these guys do in person. Freddie Peralta's on the mound tonight versus Matt Peacock. I think that Freddie is another guy that you could sit here and argue with a 5-1 record. He's might have, outside of Brandon Woodruff, has been your best pitcher. It's fun this time of year for Brewers fans because we're not used to this, Kevin. We're not used to having dominant, absolutely dominant as a starting rotation. They are currently the best starting rotation in the major leagues. If this offense can just get going a little bit. Now, last 12 games, they're 9-3. They've averaged 4.7 runs in that 12-game stretch. I think we're going to start seeing these numbers creep up a little bit more.
Yeah, you just get a couple of guys going. You mentioned if Yelich is hot, the guy in front of him gets better pitches. When they say hitting is contagious, it's not just watching a guy hit the ball well and everyone else starts doing it. It's how pitchers approach you. It's how they avoid guys in the order. It's how they, you start to get inside the heads of other pitchers. And this offense is still capable of it, especially if Omar Narvaez keeps hitting the way he's hitting. What a benefit that's been on top of what he's given you behind the plate. Obviously having a terrific year. But that's the way a division-winning offense looks. Elite Christian Yelich, say, great Keston Hiura, and then 3 or 4 of these other guys that are having these great years. That's what it's supposed to look like. And from a pitching standpoint, like I said, man, every year it was the same thing. Nothing was coming out of the system that was elite level at a starting pitching level. And the Brewers threw money at Jeff Suppan and Kyle Loesch and Matt Garza over and over and over in an attempt to find someone that could give them something at the front of the rotation. And what they ended up doing is spending all this money for 3 starters, number 3 starters, or number 4 starters, or in the case of Matt Garza, guys that didn't finish their deal. So it's, this is the thing that has plagued the franchise. To me, outside Milwaukee, people would characterize the Brewers for the last decade as a team with a terrific offense who's always searching for starting pitching. And if they change that narrative, it's a huge, huge win for them.
And I think we're going to see some fireworks come September, come October. I do think that this Brewers team does win the division. It's going to be tight. Obviously, the Cubs are playing phenomenal. Cardinals are always stingy and annoying, but I think it'll come down to starting pitching. And I think, obviously, like I said, this Brewers rotation is the best I've seen. I think that's what's going to propel this team into September, going into October, and hopefully a long run. It's an exciting time to be not only live in Milwaukee, but to be a fan of our teams. We're on the way up. COVID's starting to go away. Giannis is in the playoffs, and the Brewers and Christian Yelich is healthy. So it's an exciting time for sure. That'll do it for today's show. If you guys are on the live feed on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, thank you so much for tuning in. Always a pleasure to talk about our favorite teams. I really want to thank Kevin. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're absolutely always busy. For you to be ready to jump on to a podcast you may not have been so sure about what it was going to be about, but thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that eventually we can maybe talk about a Bucks finals run. I mean, that would be fun, especially for you guys over at CBS. I know that would probably mean a whole lot to you guys as well.
It'd be a lot of fun if we could have that kind of summer. Brandon, you got a slick setup, man. This is a lot of fun. I just sitting here, at home, but next to you here and watching all of this happen. This is a real nice setup. You got a good thing going here.
I appreciate that. I love these teams. I was not to get on a sob story here. I was gone for the last 12, 13 years. I just moved back home recently. This has kind of always been a dream of mine, is to talk about sports. I found myself doing it all the time, wherever I was stationed around the world, and defending the Bucks and the Brewers and obviously the Packers. So I figured, why not? This is what I want to do. Let's turn it into a little bit of a podcast. Let's get some guys on and let's break it down. So it's absolutely an honor to have you on. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you guys for all tuning in. That'll do it for today's show. Please follow me on Twitter at Wisco_Brandon. Follow my special guest, Mr. Kevin Holden at 321Q Kevin. Also follow him on your TVs, local Milwaukee guys or fans, CBS 58. You can find him on the Spanish play-by-play as well for the Brewers and preseason Packers, if I'm not mistaken. So give him a follow on Twitter as well. Thank you to our sponsors. If you guys are looking for, the next Brewers gear, the next Packers gear, Bucks gear, check on over at fanatics.com. The link is posted and pinned at the top of our social media pages on Facebook and Twitter. Like I said prior to the show now has merchandise. Grab a hoodie, grab a tank top, help support the show off for your city, for your teams. And until next time, which will actually be Saturday night, tomorrow night, I'll be on live doing a live post-game show. That'll do it, like I said, for today's show. I hope everybody out there has a phenomenal weekend. Stay safe, as always. Get out and enjoy the weather. It's going to be a little hot. I already got the AC on. So it's going to be a great weekend in Milwaukee and Wisconsin. Like always, go Bucks, go Brewers, be safe, Milwaukee, and I will talk to you soon.